We often mistake stories for entertainment. We sit in darkened theaters. We read by the light of a lamp. We listen to the elders by the fire, believing that we are merely passing time. We believe we are escaping reality, but the research suggests something far more profound, and perhaps far more terrifying. We are not escaping reality. We are organizing it. If you strip away the cultural flesh, if you peel back the specific names of the gods, the local geography of the legends, and the technological trappings of modern cinema, you will find a skeleton, a singular, rigid, and biological structure that has not changed since the human species first developed the capacity for language. Whether we are looking at the clay tablets of ancient Sumer, the intricate song lines of the Australian Dreamtime, or the neuroimaging data of a 21st century laboratory, the data converges on one undeniable fact. The ultimate story is not an art form. It is a survival mechanism. It is the software that allows the hardware of the human brain to interface with the chaotic reality of the cosmos without succumbing to madness. To understand this, we must look at the universe through the lens of thermodynamics. The fundamental law of our existence is entropy. Things fall apart. Order inevitably decays into disorder. Information degrades into noise. Biological life is a desperate, temporary revolt against this law. We are islands of low entropy in a vast ocean of disorder, and the tool we use to maintain that order, to predict the future, to model the unknown, and to keep the chaos at bay, is narrative. This is the investigation of that architecture. We are not merely looking at literary theory here. We are looking at the cognitive architecture of the human species. We are looking at a recursive algorithm that maps the transition from order, which is safety, to chaos, which is surprisal, and back to a reconstituted order. Let us begin by surveying the shape of this skeleton. For decades, scholars have noticed that myths from cultures separated by oceans and millennia share a universal grammar. Just as we are born with the innate capacity for language, we seem to be born with an innate capacity for this specific narrative structure. The most famous articulation of this is, of course, the monomyth, popularized by Joseph Campbell. Campbell called it the hero's journey, but we must look deeper than the romantic title. We must look at the mechanics. Campbell identified a cycle: separation, initiation, and return. But if we view this through our new lens of entropy, the definitions change. The story always begins in the ordinary world. This is a state of low entropy. It is the status quo. The predictive models of the society are working. Everyone knows their place. The sun rises and sets. The harvest comes. It is stable. But stability, if left too long, becomes stagnation. Then comes the call to adventure. In our analysis, this is not just a plot point. It is the introduction of a high entropy signal, an anomaly. A stranger arrives. A crime is committed. A god is offended. The status quo is disrupted. The system is now facing a prediction error. The old model no longer works. The hero, who is the proxy for the human mind, must cross the threshold. They must leave the known world of order and enter the special world. This is the realm of fluid laws and high danger. It is the forest at night. It is the deep ocean. It is the underworld. Campbell speaks of the belly of the whale. This is the moment the hero is swallowed by the unknown. Psychologically, this represents the dissolution of the ego, but cognitively, this is the point of maximum entropy. The internal model of the world has shattered. The hero is in a state of pure chaos, where previous rules do not apply. This leads to the road of trials. This is not just a series of fights. It is the process of active learning. The hero is forging new neural pathways. They are testing new hypotheses against reality. They fail, they adapt, and they learn. They are building a new model. Finally, the apotheosis, or the return. The hero confronts the ultimate source of the chaos, integrates it, and returns to the ordinary world. But, and this is crucial, the world they return to is not the same world they left. It is a reconstituted order. It is a system that has been updated to include the anomaly. The entropy has been reduced, and the complexity of the system has increased. This cycle, order, chaos, reorder, is the heartbeat of the human experience. It is why the Epic of Gilgamesh, written on clay in Babylon, follows the same beat sheet as a modern blockbuster. Gilgamesh leaves the order of Uruk, faces the chaos of the wild and the terror of mortality, and returns with wisdom. He couldn't find immortality, but he found a way to stabilize his understanding of death. He reduced his prediction error. But the monomyth is not the only shape the skeleton takes. If we widen our aperture, we see that this entropic function explains not just the hero's journey, but every fundamental plot utilized by the human imagination. Consider the analysis of Christopher Booker, who argued for 7 basic plots. These are not contradictions of the monomyth. They are variations on the theme of conflict resolution. Take the plot of overcoming the monster. Beowulf, Jaws, David and Goliath. The structure is identical. The status quo is threatened by an external agent of chaos, the monster. The narrative trajectory is a battle to eliminate that agent and restore homeostasis. It is a simulation of immune system defense. Or consider tragedy, Oedipus Rex, Hamlet, Macbeth. Here, the agent of chaos is not external, it is internal. It is the fatal flaw, or hubris. The narrative simulates a system failure due to an internal error. It serves as a warning signal to the tribe. Check your internal parameters, or the system will collapse. Even comedy, in the classical sense, is about the resolution of social entropy. A comedy begins with confusion, mistaken identities, and social friction, high social entropy. It ends with a marriage or a reunion, the restoration of social cohesion. The anthropologist Claude Lévi-Strauss viewed this from a structuralist perspective. He didn't see linear stories, he saw logical machines. He argued that myths are tools for mediating binary oppositions, life and death, nature and culture, raw and cooked. The human mind struggles with these contradictions. The trickster figure, Loki, Coyote, Hermes, exists to bridge these binaries. They are figures of the boundary, walking the line between the sacred order and the profane chaos.
So, we have established the morphology, the shape of the beast. We see the cycle of the hero, the plots of conflict resolution, and the mediation of binaries. But this is just the surface. To truly understand why this structure is an ontological necessity, we must go back further. We must look at the very first stories ever told, the cosmogonies, the myths of creation itself. If the morphological substrate provides the shape of the story, theology and cosmology provide its orientation. The ultimate story is, at its core, an explanation. It explains how order emerged from chaos, why that order is fragile, which we call the fall, and how it can be maintained or restored through redemption or ritual. When we examine the cosmogonies, the creation myths of the world, we find they are almost universally stories of differentiation. They depict a movement from undifferentiated high-entropy chaos to differentiated low-entropy order. Consider the Chaos Kampf, the combat myth. In the Babylonian Enuma Elish, the universe begins not as a void, but as swirling chaotic waters personified by the dragon Tiamat. The god Marduk must defeat this dragon of chaos and fashion the world from her dismembered corpse. This is not merely violence, it is architecture. It establishes the foundational truth of the human experience. Existence is a constant battle against the primordial fluid state. Order is not the default. Order is something that must be carved out of the monster. We see this pattern repeated with haunting precision in China. The universe begins as a cosmic egg, a state of pure potentiality. Pangu breaks it, separating yin from yang, the earth from the sky. This separation creates the binary distinctions necessary for reality to exist. But note what happens later in the mythology. The goddess Nuwa must repair the broken sky. The narrative is not just about creation, it is about maintenance. It acknowledges that the pillars of heaven are fragile, that the roof of the world can leak, and that entropy is always scratching at the door. This brings us to the flood myth. Why is the story of a great deluge found in the Near East, in the Americas, in India, and in China? It is not because there was necessarily a single global rainstorm. It is because the flood represents the ultimate systemic failure. It is the system returning to its preordered fluid state. The arc, or the mountain peak, represents the preservation of the seed of order. the genetic or mimetic information required to reboot the system. But if creation is the establishment of order, the fall is the inciting incident of the human condition. It is the moment the ordinary world of unconscious animal existence is lost forever. In the Judeo-Christian tradition, the eating of the fruit grants knowledge of good and evil. We often read this as moral culpability, but let us view it through cognitive science. This is the birth of dualistic thinking. This is the birth of self-consciousness. Adam and Eve realize they are naked. They realize they are separate from their environment. This is the subject-object split. To be human is to have limited vision. To be human is to be anxious about the future. In the Mayan Popol Vuh, the gods cloud the vision of the first humans because they see too much. They are too like the gods. The fall, therefore, is the emergence of predictive anxiety. It is the moment the organism realizes it is alone, fragile, and must predict the future to survive. This generates the terror of what will happen next, the birth of linear time, and the absolute necessity for narrative to bridge the gap between the present and the future. However, not all cultures solve this problem with a linear timeline. And this is where the Australian Aboriginal concept of the dreaming, or Chukurpa, offers us a radical, crucial piece of the universal skeleton. Western narrative is often teleological. It moves toward a finale, an apocalypse, a resolution. The Aboriginal narrative is homeostatic. It is about maintaining the balance. The song lines are not just songs. They are navigational data and ecological instructions. By singing the song, the traveler navigates the land, but more importantly, the belief is that if the song is not sung, the land dies. The connection is lost. This is the ultimate story functioning as an anti-entropic ritual. It is a confrontation with the potential for chaos, forgetting the law, and the ritualized restoration of order through ceremony. It proves that story is a technology for resisting decay. We see a similar divergence when we look east versus west. The Western hero, influenced by Zoroastrianism and Abrahamic faiths, walks a line from creation to apocalypse. The problem is sin, and the solution is redemption, an external change, a defeating of the villain. The Eastern hero, influenced by Hindu and Buddhist thought, walks a wheel. The problem is not sin, but illusion, or Maya. The solution is not to save the world, which is destined to cycle anyway, but to wake up from it, to achieve liberation. Yet, despite these differences, the mechanism is identical. A protagonist overcomes an obstacle, whether it be sin or illusion, to achieve a higher state of being, salvation or enlightenment. The software is the same, only the user interface differs. So, we arrive at the pivotal question, why? Why do all cultures, regardless of isolation, tell stories with this specific fractal shape? Why does the monomyth persist? Why do we obsess over the sequence of status quo, disruption, and restoration? The answer lies not in culture, but in biology. The ultimate story is a projection of the brain's fundamental operating system. It is the user interface for the human predictive processor. To understand this, we must turn our eyes away from the ancient texts and toward the cutting edge of neuroscience, specifically the work of Karl Friston and the free energy principle. This is where the humanities collide with physics. We have explored the ancient roots and the structural branches. Now, we must dig into the root system. We must answer the fundamental question. Why does the human brain demand this specific sequence of order, chaos, and restoration? The answer lies in the free energy principle. Proposed by neuroscientist Karl Friston, this principle suggests that all biological systems, from a single cell to a human brain, have one primary directive: to maintain their internal order against the natural tendency toward disorder. To survive, an organism must remain within a specific range of states: temperature, oxygen, blood sugar. If you go outside these bounds, you die. You dissolve into the environment. So how does the brain ensure we stay within these bounds? It becomes a prediction machine. The brain is not a passive camera lens, simply recording the world. It is a proactive generator. It constantly hallucinates a model of the world and predicts what sensory input it should receive. As long as the world behaves as predicted, the brain is calm. Energy consumption is low. This is the ordinary world of the story. It is the status quo. But what happens when the world violates the prediction? What happens when you hear a rustle in the grass where there should be silence? This is surprisal. This is high entropy. This is a prediction error. In narrative terms, we call this the inciting incident, the call to adventure. It is the moment the internal model fails to account for reality. When this error occurs, the organism has only two choices to minimize the surprise and avoid death. 1. It can change the world to match its model. This is action. 2. It can change its model to match the world. This is perception or learning. Now, look at the road of trials through this lens. The hero enters the unknown. They try a strategy. It fails. They try another. They are battered and bruised. This is active inference. The hero is the agent, acting upon the chaotic environment to resolve the error. They are minimizing free energy through struggle. And finally, the climax, the ordeal. This is the state of maximum plasticity. The old self, the old predictive model, must die because it is insufficient. It cannot account for the dragon. In the fires of that crisis, a new model is forged. The hero realizes the truth. They acquire the boon. And when they return, they bring back a new, more robust model of the world. The surprise has been minimized. The order has been restored, but it is a higher, more complex order. This creates a startling picture. We do not tell stories to escape. We tell stories to train. The ultimate story is a flight simulator for the human mind. We watch a hero face high-entropy situations, death, loss, social exile, so that we can update our own internal models without the risk of actual death. Stories are low-cost, high-yield entropy reduction simulations. This explains why the structure is so rigid. It explains why a story without conflict feels boring. A story without conflict is a system without prediction error. There is nothing to learn. There is no update required. It is biologically useless to us. But the implications go even deeper than biology. They touch on the very geometry of our existence. Human thought is recursive. We can think about thinking. We can tell a story within a story. This recursive capability allows the narrative skeleton to be fractal. A fractal is a shape that looks the same at any scale. Zoom in and you see the whole. Zoom out and you see the part. The ultimate story is a fractal. Look at the microscale. A single conversation. You state a position, order. Someone disagrees, chaos. You debate, struggle, and reach an agreement, restoration. Look at the mesoscale, a life. You are born, you struggle through the trials of adulthood, you gain wisdom, you leave a legacy. Look at the macro scale, the history of a civilization, rise, crisis, fall, renaissance. Look at the cosmic scale, the Big Bang, differentiation, the expansion into the dark, entropy, and perhaps the eventual heat death or cyclical return. The logic that governs the formation of a galaxy, gravity ordering dust, is the same logic that governs the formation of a psyche, narrative ordering experience. The ultimate story is the human mind's attempt to map the geometry of reality itself. This brings us to a final, sobering realization. As we stand on the precipice of a new era, dominated by artificial intelligence, we see the skeleton again. Large language models are, quite literally, prediction machines. They are minimizing the entropy of the next token. They are mimicking the active inference of the human mind. The fact that AI can generate coherent stories is not a sign that it has a soul. It is proof that the story is mathematical. It is statistical. It is a property of information processing itself. But there is a warning here. The skeleton requires conflict. It requires the fall. A world without entropy, a perfect static utopia, has no story. It is a flat line. It is thermal death. Thus, the story of humanity is not about eliminating chaos entirely. It is about the eternal dance with it. The research leads us to this conclusion. The ultimate story is the triumph of information over entropy. It is the defiant assertion of the mind that despite the chaos, despite the silence of the void, this means something. The skeleton is this. We were one. We broke apart. We suffered in the dark. We learned a new name for the light. We returned to the one, changed. This is the story of the universe. This is the story of the brain. And inevitably, this is the story of you.